Thank you everyone for joining us for today's virtual FedFleet session on right-sizing success. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Amber Robles.
Thank you, Stacy. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the virtual FedFleet panel session on right-sizing success. I'm Amber Robles, and I'm the Offering Management Branch Chief with GSA Fleet, and I'm joined by Joe Niadowski, who is the Short-Term Rental Branch Chief, and we'll serve as the moderators for this afternoon's panel. We have three panelists today from across the GSA Fleet program that are going to discuss various aspects of the vehicle replacement process, including annual acquisition guidance, various ways to right-size your fleet, and leveraging other GSA Fleet offerings and services, such as short-term rental and telematics. We have a list of questions for our panelists that cover these topics and are looking forward to today's conversation. There should be time at the end of the panel to answer any questions that you may have. So as Stacy mentioned, we do ask that you hold those until the end. And we also welcome any comments on your experiences right-sizing your own fleet, if there's anything that we don't touch on today. So we will have hopefully plenty of time for those questions and comments, and we look forward to getting started. So first, we wanted to allow our panel members to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about their background with GSA. So I'm going to rotate through, and we ask that each of the panel members, if you could just introduce yourself, provide your position and a quick overview in your role in helping customers right-size their fleet. So I will start with Jeremy, if you'd like to go first.
Thank you, Amber. Good afternoon. Jeremy Hughes. I am the fleet manager, currently working out of the Fort Walton Beach office. I cover the state of Florida, the state of Alabama, and the state of Mississippi. Currently 15 fleet service representatives working for me, and just over 20,000 vehicles that fall in that area of responsibility. We lean heavily on working with our customers to right-size their fleet to make sure that we are maximizing the utilization of their vehicles in their day-to-day missions.
Thanks, Jeremy. Next, we have Steve.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Are we good? Okay. All right. I am Steve Grafton. I've been with GSA probably about 12, 13 years now. I am the Zone 1 operations manager. I also sit in the Washington, D.C. area in Springfield, Virginia. Have a lot to do with the fleet here. I also have a lot to do with the fleet in Zone 1. Have been diversifying and all good stuff. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And last but not least, we have Matt.
Good morning from California. I'm sitting in San Francisco with the San Francisco Fleet Management Center. And so I'm primarily supporting directly the customer mission. I have 81 different customers, 2,100 plus or minus vehicles. And then my role in the right sizing of the fleet management process is to help the customers with their analysis, some evaluation, and then drilling down, selecting the right type of vehicle. And we'll get into all of these elements of how to right size that fleet. So there's a lot involved, and we hope you enjoy the conversation.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Good morning for some. As Amber said, I'm Joe Niadowski, and I'll start off with the questions here. First, we'll rotate through the panelists. First question that we're going to ask is about the annual agency headquarter questionnaire that goes to headquarter fleet managers. And specific question is, how can this questionnaire help fleet managers right-size their fleets? We'll start the first question with Steve.
Good afternoon. So how can the questionnaire help fleet managers right-size As an operations manager, I actually deal a lot more so with the headquarters fleet managers or the different elements within an agency. Big thing is by setting a foundation for the agency's vehicle policies and requirements. The questionnaires, their answers must be comprehensive and address the agency's mission, encompassing a broad range of variables and operational needs across the facets of the agency, i.e. things like operations, logistics, protective services, OIGs, again, a broad range for each agency. The good thing is the questionnaire puts out there when limiting vehicle sizes and types of colors and types of vehicles and things like that. A good thing is making sure that headquarters fleet manager also clearly define exceptions. And who gets those exceptions, which BOACs, which customers, and to specify procurable vehicles and this type of thing. So.
Thanks, Steve. Jeremy or Matt, would either of you like to provide some input on this, on the questionnaire as far as your role in helping fleet managers right-size their fleets?
Yeah, Joe, just to piggyback a little bit on what Steve had hit there, I will say that it's kind of like our first line of communication with the agencies on what their needs are. And for that, it can seem rather cumbersome sometimes, as it's a one document that is trying to capture their entire agency's fleet needs. But taking the time to get the details in there is going to aid our FSRs very greatly when it comes to finding exactly what they need, and then also going out and sourcing and procuring it through different means and trying to eliminate some of the back and forth, maybe cleared up some of the mud that can be found during our acquisition cycle.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Steve was making some very, very smart points about how this process involves all the layers in the fleet management process. So my role as a fleet service rep, and I'm reaching out and working directly with our customers, and we'll find that the mission in the West Coast or high altitude, you've got an extreme weather event, or you're exposed to a variant in your environment. So it's going to be helpful to have that source document to be the guideposts, and then we need to negotiate that pathway with each customer on each vehicle to make sure that we're providing the best vehicle to support that mission. Yeah.
Thanks, Matt and Jeremy. Definitely a good idea. Good starting point when you're having these discussions. Move on to the next question.
Okay. Our next question has to do with the replacement vehicle request and approval process, which is currently ongoing right now. And the question is, can the replacement vehicle approval process help with right-sizing vehicle fleets? For this one, we can start with Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Amber. The vehicle replacement process and the right sizing, right? There are 2 points that balance this process that we're looking at in this one question. Replacing a vehicle and having the conversation, either on paper, there's justifications. We will do a whole mission evaluation. I'll work with my customer. Is this the right vehicle? Why or why not? And then the right sizing doesn't necessarily mean smaller. I've got people who are at a position where your truck is too small or your mission is too big. You're going to have to change one of those two. And so then we'll look at what's available and what might be the next best vehicle to fill that mission role. When I was at the VA as a fleet manager, I'd initiate my own analysis of my fleet in the month of August. I would prepare all of my vehicle selections and evaluating, taking in as much information as I could, and then preparing my replacement list in the month of October, well before the list was released. And I might over prepare, and then when the list was presented to the fleet manager, here's the lists available, then I was ready to go ahead and just process all of those as quickly as possible. But one of the primary elements in all of these conversations this afternoon are going to be that how important is the conversation, right? We need to communicate with the customer. We need to communicate within the GSA leadership role, as well as the customer communicating within their leadership role. But going back to the primary question, replacement vehicle process, the approval process, as long as we're standing within those guidelines that come right out of the agency headquarters guidance, a lot of this will really process quickly. If we have unique one-off standalones, then we work quickly with the customer to create justifications and really apply logic to the mission so that when you present your package and it gets evaluated moving up to the agency headquarters, it speaks on its own, right? You want to be able to prepare a document or a package that has logical steps in it, and anyone else reading that with knowledge of your mission would be able to come to the same conclusion. So yeah, each one of these steps is very important. And I'll probably go back to this a little bit later, but yeah, it's this ongoing conversation is very organic this afternoon. I'm excited for it.
Thanks, Matt. Jeremy, would you like to weigh in?
Yes, Amber. Matt was right there on it with every bit of that. And the one piece I wanted to add to that is that maybe is not clearly specified or laid out in the question is timing. As if you've attended any of the other virtual Fed fleets, you know, from the manufacturers panel, and I'll throw it. Any of the acquisition team, Lynn will say that timing is everything. And not only is it just making sure that we can get the right vehicle for you, but that we are making those decisions in a timely manner and trying to get those orders in without waiting for the last, the last dinner bell to hit, so we can try to get you the right vehicle with the right price without having to possibly go into a second or third option that maybe doesn't meet fully all your needs.
Thank you, Jeremy. Steve?
Yeah, again, thank you. So does the replacement vehicle approval process help with right-sizing vehicles? Absolutely. The replacement vehicle approval process is a key tool for right-sizing because it's a validation through multiple levels. And just to go back through 101 with GSA, so as we all know, it goes through the local customer who initially validates the replacement need. Then it goes on to the mid-level, who further validates that need and ensures that alternatives are being considered, things like co-utilization, right-sizing, short-term rental possibilities if a replacement isn't needed. And then it goes on to the headquarters fleet manager, who again provides final validation and ensures that alignment with the overall fleet strategy with the agency. Again, at each level assesses whether the replacement can be filled through co-utilization, short-term rental, and sometimes, you know, we take it for granted, but not everybody needs a vehicle. So again, short-term rental, Uber for government, these are the things that you know, that you need to really drive home. I mean, you think about, I mean, I've seen quite a few studies where you be pretty amazed at the money that we spend for vehicles that may only travel anywhere from 250 to 300 miles every fiscal year. So again, the thing is it truly essential for the agency to do its mission? So thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And I agree. I think those are great ideas that were shared. And this is the time as your vehicles become eligible for replacement where you should have those conversations with your FSR to figure out if your mission requirements have changed and what is the correct way forward for your particular needs.
I agree, Amber. And one other thing that's already a theme early on in these questions, and I think will continue, is communication. Communication between headquarters, fleet managers, the local customers, GSA. Certainly helps all of this process go smoother and make sure it's as effective as possible. Moving on to the next question, and I think we'll start with Jeremy on this one. Does the annual acquisition guidance, so this would be the internal guidance with GSA that they communicate out to customers, does it provide any pointers for right sizing vehicles and fleets, and how does that help your communication with customers?
Thanks, Joe. Yes, it does. It, as we kind of alluded to in some of the other responses, it will address maybe what is our limitations. So it kind of gives us some framework of where we can start to look at what might work for a customer. And if there's something that just does not work, then we need to start working with them on providing them that proper justification to go outside through their normal chains of command to get approval for that. But showing what um, is the minimums and the maximums for what an agency can use is all clearly laid out in the acquisition guidance. And is really the framework of what our FSRs will use to kind of broach that conversation with our customers and say, we understand that your missions change and that not all headquarters, when they're writing these acquisition guidance, will understand or have a clear picture of the changing missions at the ground level. And we need to work with them and have that communication, just like Joe said. Communication is key, laterally, vertically, internally and externally. So, but yes, the more information that we have in the acquisition guidance will help us make sure that we are, one, being good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, and that we're getting the vehicle that's right for the customer to conduct their mission and not let it sit and go underutilized.
Good stuff. Thanks, Jeremy. Steve, do you want to weigh in on this one next?
Sure, Jeremy hit it pretty good. Again, the guidance is out there. I mean, the agencies are putting into practice their size stipulations, the colors, whether it be sedans, sport utility vehicles. The other thing to consider, of course, is optional equipment justification. You know, some towing requirements and things like this that we have in a lot of operational matters, such as, you know, if it's FAA and they're towing trailers or different things like this, they need a certain size vehicle. Increased engine size. Some of our law enforcement communities and some of our executive level have rationale for increased engine sizes, things like this. And even like USDA with like extreme off-duty road requirements, things like this. The good thing too is, you know, this questionnaire also addresses any vehicle turn-in plans. That's a good forefronter for us to start looking and forecasting whenever we get that. Of course, we want to know that right away. And then, you know, it kind of alludes to fleet efficiency optimization. Again, I don't think one thing that I think we need to pay particular attention is when vehicles are in controlled areas, especially in major metropolitan cities. You know, again, you have the opportunity to probably dispatch vehicles to people. I mean, a lot easier versus having a vehicle assigned to every one person or every one agent. And there's big opportunities for co-utilization in all this practice, and can't mention that enough. And then again, short-term rental, and then also Uber for government. Great things. Thank you.
Thanks. And finally, Matt, anything else? And Steve, I love the short-term rental shout-outs, by the way.
Yeah, there's quite a few things that I'm gonna, there's things we're gonna say for later, which would be good now, but you'll get more of it later. The one of the elements that's available to the fleet service rep and to the customer at the same time is our vehicle availability listing. And that's based on the contracts that our purchasing team has secured with our vehicle providers. And that's a live document. So as those contracts change, that'll change the selections and the availability that's open. But knowing that it might change or it might fluctuate, work again, back to communication, working with your fleet service rep. We're working with our acquisition team, and we're identifying when these contracts might close. We can try and expedite orders. We know that the contract has a possibility that, communication, it might change, it might open again after, industry refresh. And so we might hold off a little bit. So the pace of the vehicle acquisition is also going to be influenced by the other data elements that are still available, the vehicle availability listing.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, and for our next question, we've mentioned underutilization in the short-term rental program, so this relates directly to that. The question is, what about short-term rental? Can that help with underutilized vehicles? We can start with Steve.
Thanks, Amber. Again, you've heard me put a couple of shout outs for short-term rental, but it's an awesome program. A lot of times folks are not really thinking about that, and it needs to be an active tool in your belt. Again, eliminating underutilized assets is a great thing. Short-term rentals worldwide, you can rent up to vehicles for up to 120 days. You can rent equipment for up to 365 days. It's ideal for seasonal workloads, special events. One thing that I, being the military type, and all three of us are Air Force, that's just by happenstance. But one thing that I do want to mention, if you have to put it on your travel voucher, then that's not a short-term rental thing. But if you're, and I'll just use this scenario, if you're at Barksdale Air Force Base and you're going through an IG inspection, that transportation coordinator on the ground should be reaching out to short-term rental to say, this is what I need for all my folks that are coming to Barksdale Air Force Base. So there are ways around things, again, but if you're using it on your travel voucher, that's not what short-term rental is about. So, but it's a great program. And if you just have seasonal workloads, or you just have an occasional where you need a vehicle and to go out and do whatever it is that you do, then it's excellent. It's an awesome tool.
Thanks, Steve. Matt, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And again, going back to my experience as a fleet manager, a customer fleet manager with the VA, when I assumed the role as a supervisor in charge of the entire motor pool and the transportation process, we were in the middle of a consolidation. And save that, because we're going to get into that pretty deep here in a minute. But the short-term rental was the bridge that they were using while we were waiting. Part of the consolidation was equipped with vehicles that were non-operational. And that was part of our negotiation with GSA in that evaluation process. So the consolidation process was very important, but short-term rental, to this point, it is designed as a limited bridge based on mission, like mission surge or other processes. It became evident that we needed to, quicken up, expedite the process to get these vehicles consolidated. We were in almost the second year of short-term rentals, and it was not helpful. In the point of a surge mission, I've rented buses, and they were excellent. They did exactly what we needed to do. Large equipment trucks, we weren't going to be able to lease a full-time rate on a large equipment truck. I had the drivers qualified to operate it, but we just did a short-term rental as needed. Beautiful. So consider all those options. Again, talk with your fleet service rep, and there's just a wealth of knowledge in GSA. And yeah, there's your best resource is going to be gsafleet.gov and the resource center and your customer leasing guide. Those are excellent points.
Thanks, Matt. Jeremy, did you have anything to add that hasn't been covered?
Just some numbers, and I know that Joe will be able to give the detail on how our short-term rental program has expanded, but just some initial high-level numbers of diving into the roughly, I believe it's 232,000 some odd vehicles that we had last time I was looking at it. roughly anywhere from between 24 to 26% of those vehicles are underutilized. And that's just across our entire fleet, where there could be some potential savings by looking at some of our different options that are available. We understand that there might be an absolute specific need for that vehicle to be underutilized because of its unique mission. But this is not only our responsibility, but our customers' responsibility to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to make sure that we are using every dollar wisely.
Couldn't agree more. And something that I think everybody touched on too is that I want to make sure that I'm, emphasizing too is that STR is a great option. It is expensive. We want to make sure it's being used correctly. It is for those short-term needs. If you have any questions on when it should be used, that's what my team is here for. That's what your FSR is for. Definitely reach out and make sure. We want to make sure that you're in the right offering to get the exact right vehicle at the right price that you need. Moving on to the next question. How have you helped customers with the right sizing in your roles? What utilization data or cost comparisons did you use? And so I know all of you have backgrounds outside of GSA in fleet management too. Feel free to tap into those roles as well. And for this question, we will start with Matt.
Great. Thank you, Joe. The cost comparison, the role of data analysis can't be understated. I mentioned earlier how I would collect data, process, evaluate my fleet, build a wish list of vehicles I'd like to replace. And then when that list dropped from GSA, I'd already gone through and spec'd out what I wanted. And one of the tools that the agency employs, and it's from GSA, it's a tool that we all use to help evaluate and analyze the mission, is the VAM, the Vehicle Allocation Methodology. And that's just a tool that's created so that you can establish what your mission is, what you need to be doing. The agency helps to direct how that's employed within the agency and aligned with its guidance. And then it helps GSA in our position where we can help evaluate in that process as well. So yeah, collecting data, providing data, again, going back to your reports carryout and your other fleet tools that are currently available in your mileage and your annual, the rolling mileage report, AIEs, the whole cost of operating your vehicle will help establish that fundamental analysis. How much am I spending? What am I expecting to spend next year? If I'm going to change a vehicle, I need to project that type of information. And that's part of that right sizing. It's like, I do need to increase my equipment truck and I need to reduce my large passenger vans. I need more minivans. And so there's a trade-off in that balance. Again, going back and looking at your leasing rates and looking at all of the data, how many miles do I drive? Like what Steve and both Joe, we've all been talking about how the short-term rental, Uber, there's just a lot of tools that are available to fill in the color in those margins so that we're getting that full picture. One element that I wanted to point out here is that when we are looking at vehicle change, the size of the vehicle, you want to make sure that you're working closely with your FSR, that as you build an equipment truck and your mission increases and you need to move more items or your volume or the weight increases, you might be looking at a change in your classification for your motor vehicle operators. They might require, now the new vehicle might require a CDL. And the GSA is not the one-stop shop for all CDL knowledge, but we can point you in the direction of where you need to go. One of the best resources as a fleet manager are the people who work for you, how they're operating the vehicles, what do they need, what's been their experience. So part of that, again, going back and getting that data analysis, collecting as much as you can. That's primarily what I wanted to share, is just the importance of collecting the information and using it to best prosecute your vehicle selection, keeping in mind the VAM, the agency guidance, and just a lot of the other items we've discussed.
Thanks, Matt. Really good information. We'll go to Jeremy next on this question.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, this is our day-to-day job. I think this is what makes the job the most exciting piece is one, getting out and meeting the customers, figuring out their mission. And I think the one of the key examples to this was the Corps of Engineers in Vicksburg, Mississippi. They're one of my first customers. And as I was building them back for their third transmission in a Dodge 1500, I asked them the questions of why. So the key to this is the word right sizing. It's not downsizing, it's not upsizing, it's just right sizing. It's making sure that the vehicle that we're selecting for you meets your mission. Well, the situation in this was they had a Ram 1500 that was pulling a barge up and down a levee. That's all it did. Stuck in low gear, pulling a barge, and the vehicle was not outfitted with any of the items that maybe would um, conduct that mission more effectively. So they were it was costing them money to have the maintenance done on this vehicle. So when it came up for replacement, we made sure that that vehicle was more outfitted for conducting that specific role. Upgraded engine, increased power through the transmission or transmission cooler and stuff like that. We did everything we possibly could to make sure the vehicle was so specifically outfitted. So one, it was it wouldn't cost them more when it comes to the maintenance and repair. So that's just one of the examples. But yes, the data, I will say that we can probably give you more data than probably any other. Well, we are the federal government. We can give you a lot of data, but we just have to make sure that that data is presented to you in a manner that you can make informed decisions on. And that's the most important thing. And that's what our FSRs are there for.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks.
Joe, if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and jump in. And
Definitely.
so basically, as an operations manager, I mentioned this before. I mean, I do deal primarily with the headquarters fleet managers and the bureau level fleet managers. Again, some of the things, and this is just some of the tools of the trade that I use. I do about 4 or 5 studies a year. When I start to see things like customers are not reporting mileages on vehicles, sometimes in some of the smaller agencies that I've had the chance to go in and study, and I start looking at things like that. Or if and it's not just about cutting, it's also about gaining. There's a substantial number of 2 on the road vehicles. So if you don't know what 2 on the road means, 2 on the road means that you got a replacement for your existing lease and you kept your old vehicle and it's staying on the road, which is something that we really don't want because we've programmed those funds for sales. And that's how our program survives. But sometimes there's mission needs and we can do things, we can approve things up to a certain period when you do need that vehicle for longer. But I start to look at agencies when you have a repeat offender and all kinds of stuff like that. Some of the data gathering that I do, obviously in gsafleet.gov, if you haven't gone in and used customized inventory reports, by all means, please do so. Jeremy kind of touched on it. We have all kinds of data with fiscal year mileage reporting, accuracy, and it's a great tool, and you can use that to your advantage. Again, some of the utilization criteria I use is when I'm looking at agencies, vehicles traveling less than 5,000 miles per year, or vehicles traveling anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 years annually, and then vehicles traveling 8,000 plus annually. The cost comparative comparisons I use, again, especially if it's an underutilized vehicle, is looking at short-term rental. Joe, I reach out to you all the time to say, hey, are we up and running in this area, up in the mountains in Idaho or wherever? I mean, is it pretty accessible? I mean, these are the things that you got to do the research on. And again, great things. In some of these studies that I've done, the good thing is we produce savings or shown to agencies where we can save, up to 25,000, up to 500,000 in some cases. And then by right sizing where there's more vehicles that are needed. Just last year, we ordered 73 vehicles for a congressional organization based on all the two on the roads and things like that. So there's some great data in GSA on the customized inventory reports and all the different reports out there. So by all means, please go out there and look. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. So for our next question, the question is right sizing only about reducing the number of vehicles in a fleet? And for this one, we can start with Jeremy.
Thank you, Amber. And I think we've already addressed it. It's the term. It's right sizing. It's not downsizing. It's not upsizing. It's making sure that the vehicles that you have assigned to you are specifically outfitted, or as we like to use the word, spec to complete their mission. We deal in the realm of everything non-tactical, and there's a lot of agencies out there that have made decisions that is not based on right sizing. It's based on dollars. What can we save? And a prime example, I hope there's no FAA on here, but the Dodge Caravans that they downsized to from their 4x4s that were used for airfield maintenance, they probably regretted that the moment that the one was stuck out at the end near the take-on antenna. It catalytic converter caught the grass on fire and burnt the entire van to the ground. So it's not specifically just downsizing. It's about making sure that we are getting the right vehicle to conduct a mission, and that we're not, then burdening you with excessive maintenance because it's not properly outfitted to conduct that mission. So it is not just about reducing the number of fleet. It's about overall making sure that we're using every dynamic of our system to save you as much money as possible, but for it will still allow you the flexibility of conducting your missions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Those are great points. Steve, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just Jeremy had some great points there. Again, it's not just right sizing isn't about cutting, and we've said that over and over. It's about optimization of the fleet. Strategic placement, things like this where the missions are there and could be centralized were more used. And then again, there's one word that I know I use repeatedly, and that's co-utilization. I mean, co-utilization is a big thing for us. If there's an admin role in anything else like this, and there's 6 vehicles sitting out there that are assigned to agents, there's no reason why we couldn't share that vehicle to get what we need to do administratively instead of bringing on a 7th vehicle or not using STR. Co-utilization is a big key attribute of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Matt, anything to add?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. In the process of evaluating the vehicles, looking at what's next, I do have some fleet managers at the customer level who are not connected to the direct mission on the ground. They're located at a distance. They're regionalized fleet management, and then their field locations out on operations. So part of this right sizing is mission awareness, mission orientation. When our GSA fleet service reps, we sometimes change roles or change customer associations. You might have a new FSR to your team or to your agency, and they may not be as fully aware. So reaching out and providing mission awareness for the FSR so that when we provide that data analysis, we do have a better understanding. Again, just finding that right vehicle. I've had a customer come to me and ask, I need to reduce the size of my bus because the location and their mission changed. The larger bus, the wheelbase, the size, it was just difficult to negotiate smaller streets. There's a higher probability of accidents within that last mile when you're getting into congested parking lots and you're trying to negotiate a large wheelbase in a restricted space. And so with the VA, they've also wanted to go more towards the low floor entry. You have your veteran patients who are limited mobility, and you don't necessarily want them climbing a set of stairs or waiting for a wheelchair lift, but the ramp entry into the bus. So there's just factors in that mission awareness. And as the fleet manager and the fleet customer, you're in the best position to help bring that awareness to other people. Back to what I had mentioned with justifications and packages and preparing a document. Sometimes you need to remind your agency leadership about your fleet mission. Do it in a nice way, be polite. I've asked people to add photos of, they go out in the munitions range and they're testing, show them the road, the access to the field, what the field looks like. This is why we need a certain type of option on that vehicle. So it's the justification process as well. We're here to help. We just need to know what you need.
Thanks, Matt. Moving on to the next question, and we've got about a little over 10 minutes left with about 3 or 4 questions left. So, the next question is moving on to telematics and how can that help fleet managers find underutilized vehicles? Let's start with Steve on this one.
Thanks, Joe. Again, telematics offers significant advantages in identifying underutilized vehicles. We continuously improve our capabilities by leveraging the wealth of data available through Geotab and the OEM manufacturers with their telematics within GSAFleet.gov. As the data within GSA Fleet becomes more robust, telematics data will even be more effective in things like identifying underutilized vehicles, allowing for better resource allocation, streamlining accident reporting, improving response times and data accuracy, monitoring overall vehicle health, enabling proactive maintenance and reducing downtime. Telematics has some good advantages, but and keep in mind and have patience. I am not a IT wizard, but I will tell you that I am learning GSAFleet.gov as it evolves, as well as telematics data. So we're getting there. It's coming out. Get in there and learn, roll up your sleeves and see how can be. You can see.
Thanks, Steve. Matt, we'll go to you next on this one.
Thank you. Yeah, telematics is an incredible tool. It offers you so much access to your immediate data. Not only that, but you within your fleet permissions as a fleet customer, you can set up geofencing, making sure the vehicle stays within a prescribed area. And then we've also had cases of vehicles that have been stolen, and through telematics and approval from the agency, we've been able to do recovery. So those elements are advantageous. And just to remind everybody, GSA does not have access to your geolocation. We only have access to your data. Does the vehicle function well? So the Pro Plus subscription, which is actually a provided benefit to the customer now, you can elect to participate with that data source as well.
Thanks, Matt. Jeremy, anything else to add on telematics?
Telematics, yes, it's a method of one of the main methods of collecting mileage, and I will say that mileage is the foundation of our program. There's so many things that are driven off of correct mileage, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong if mileage is not reported correctly. So I would encourage all the agencies to look into either doing some kind of retrofit or, more utilization of telematics and making sure that their systems they're operating and reporting properly. Getting that information in correct would minimize a lot of our problems down and not being as reactive to issues and being more proactive.
Thanks, Jeremy. Shifting gears a bit, would you say that engine or fuel type should be considerations when right-sizing a fleet? We can start with Matt.
Yes, it can have a critical effect. Right sizing the fleet. We want to make sure that our emissions, any CARB compliance or emissions compliance for your state are being observed. That's part of another team that I'm on. I work with the Zone 1 as the center of expertise on medium and heavy duty acquisitions. And that's one of our roles as a fleet service rep, as the fleet manager, in the COE role, and Steve's role here as a branch chief is we're looking at how customer selection and agency missions are impacted by emissions, as well as what's the best next alternative. Industry design and production. The gas engine has higher torque. There are higher torque engines and horsepower engines available, which very closely match the diesel component, and they still meet emissions. So there's a lot of tools available when you're considering fleet. Yes, one of the other elements we have is the alternative fuels, and I'll let one of the other gentlemen here speak to that. But that's also a very critical nature in selecting, making sure we're adhering to guidance.
Thanks, Matt. Jeremy, anything to add?
No, I don't believe so. I think Matt hit it pretty good.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, just wanted to, Matt did hit it pretty good. But again, they are considerations, fuel type considerations are things that we definitely have to think about. As Matt knows, especially with the California Air Resources Board, that's a balancing act on some of that thing. With looking at electrics, looking at alternative fuels, things like this. Again, and we have to be in compliance with all that. So again, the big things that drive some of those choices are state and federal requirements, along with executive orders, depending on what each administration brings to the table in those instructions. The big thing to emphasize here, GSA Fleet is fuel agnostic. We don't say you can't have this, you can't have that. You know, it is the choice of the customer, but again, we just need to make sure that state and federal and executive orders are being followed. Thanks, Amber.
Okay, and this is our last prepared question before our closing remarks. What is vehicle consolidation? What are the benefits of consolidating, and how can consolidation help you right size your fleet? Jeremy, we'll start with you on this.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, consolidations is going to be a big theme going forward within GSA Fleet. Because the one thing that we want everybody to remember is, yes, we are GSA, but our agencies very likely have agency-owned assets just as much, and they have to take all this into consideration. So you cannot consider just your GSA fleet saying, yeah, we're right sizing over here, but internally our agency fleet or our green fleet is not right sized. So as a whole, looking at this as a composite picture, looking at your agency-owned assets, it may be imperative to downsize, consolidate those assets into GSA, letting us manage them, letting us look at the life cycle, putting them through our procurement cycle to refresh them if needed. But it gives you better visibility over your entire fleet, and it's all encompassing.
Thanks, Jeremy. Matt, anything to add?
Yeah, if you guys aren't busy on Tuesday, March 24th, between 10:30 and 11:30 Pacific, GSA has a consolidations desktop workshop. It's going to be full of a lot of great information. I encourage you to attend. It's how to transition your agency-owned and commercial leased vehicles into GSA Fleet. We're building it especially for you, and we want to see you there.
And finally, Steve, anything else to add on consolidations?
Big thing here is it's saving money. Bottom line, I mean, you don't. How many other leasing companies do you know that will actually pay for your fuel, pay for your maintenance, as long as it's, of course, what's the word I'm looking for? it's routine maintenance, but again, and actually give you $25 per month per vehicle to wash your vehicle too. So consolidating makes sense economically. When we go to procure vehicles, we have savings anywhere from 8 to 20% off contracts uh, in GSA Fleet, and it's the right thing to do. And it's all about saving money and making sure you're getting the mission using the most technologically advanced vehicles. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, and lastly, and I'll just open this up to everybody. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that wasn't covered today? We talked about some great topics, great information.
I'll close it out for us, Joe. And I want to say that I thank everyone for taking their time to join us on this virtual FedFleet. It would have been great to have seen as many of y'all in person, but we're making the best of this. And I really do encourage each and every one of you to reach out and work with your FSRs, your fleet managers, to figure out what is right for your agency and your fleet. And we're here for you.
Thanks, Jeremy. And Stacy, I think we're about at time. Do we have any time for questions or?
Hey, Joe, if you don't mind, I wanted to mention something real quick.
Please do.
Just real quick, we're in that wonderful time of year where vehicles should not be at the local level, the mid-level, or the headquarters. They should be with us, and we should be procuring those vehicles for you. So again, really put a big pun out there we want to get ahead of the game here. We're trying to close out requisitions for your replacements. So please get them moving. I've sent out numerous emails here recently, and I'm getting some grief from, some of the people that I'm courtesy copying, thinking that's all I do all day. But again, make your selections at the local level, approvals at the mid-level, and approvals at the headquarters. We appreciate that. All good.
Thanks, Steve.
As far as time goes, I truly leave that up to all of you. I'm good to hang on for a little bit. From a technical standpoint, there's no reason we can't stick on if you want to address these couple of questions that have come in. But if you don't have time, I totally understand and respect that.
Sure. So we have a question from Larry here. Speaking of STRs, renting a bus, for example, the driver has to have a regular license, allows them to drive a bus, possibly Class B if required. Military license does not count, correct? So it's got to be anything over a 15 passenger bus requires a CDL, Larry, or equivalent. Next question, and we'll open this one up to the panel here. The usage threshold metric is very helpful. Is there also a maximum threshold or guidance for when increasing fleet size might be appropriate? And are the days used, engine hours, and driving hours available through GSA fleet reporting? Almost sounds like a telematics question, but Steve or Matt or Jeremy?
I was almost wanting to jump in on that last question about the STR bus.
Feel free.
And you can correct me if I'm incorrect. If you have a military member who has a military license, and that person is trained and qualified to operate what would normally be a commercial motor vehicle, a CMV. But once when you're leasing the vehicle, it comes under the same training requirements as the hosting agency. And as a military vehicle operator, if you have your trained license, you can operate a rented equipment without the commercial license because it falls under the military. I believe, I'm not sure if that's exactly true or not, but the rest of it, yes. Any commercial rental in the VA or any other federal agency, your civilian motor vehicle operators will have to be licensed appropriately to operate that vehicle.
Yeah, that's correct, Matt.
Hey, Joe, I'm going to take a stab at Sam's question there.
Sure.
The maximum threshold, I've always looked at it as a 1-for-1. When your agencies are looking at, you have a mean, which is 400. If you increase your fleet by 2, there should be 2 that are being turned in. So you come back to that mean. But with anything that exceeds that, it would be looked at as like an additional that is coming into your fleet that would need agency headquarters approval for that to be added. As far as the days used, the engine hours, our systems are advancing to a point where we're trying to capture engine hours. That way we can start seeing idle times and as such. But the days used, that is some customer driven data that's not required to be input by the FSRs, but it is stuff that can be inputted by the agencies that can then be utilized during their annual studies to show utilization.
Thanks, Jeremy. Stacy, I think that's all the questions, so we'll turn it back over to you to close.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists and our hosts. I think this was a great conversation. So again, thank you for attending virtual FedFleet 2026. If you're coming in one of the last 2 sessions, we'll see you then as well. We will be adding a recording of this to GSA's YouTube channel, probably in just a couple of weeks here. And we will send out an email once all of those recordings have been posted. Slides will not be posted. And again, check your FAI CSOT account in a few days, if you have one, to see if your CLPs have been added. If you do request a certificate for the session and you have a CSOT account, don't also add that. That doesn't work. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for attending Virtual FedFleet 2026. We look forward to hopefully seeing you in person in 2027.
Thank you.